Bernadette, it's so lovely to be able to sit beside you and at long last get a bit of a chat with you. I know you come from the County Tyrone, and a county is so full of, so rich in culture and rich in song traditions and all that sort of thing. Tell me a little bit about your very young days.
Well, people kind of know me when I started to make trouble. But I was actually the best child in the house for a long time.
I'd like to see the rest.
And the rest of them weren't bad. But there was 6 in our house, and I was the third, 5 girls and a boy. And in later years, you know, when you were adults looking back on your family, I remember my sister Elizabeth, God rest her, she died of cancer some years ago. She was only a year and a half younger than me, but when we were older and rearing our own children, she said, at what point did it dawn on you that we were a dysfunctional family? They hadn't been invented when we were wee. There was no names for them, they were just families. But we were an interesting family, put it that way. My mother, they used to say, my mother was the kindest woman in Cookstown. And to this day, people would speak of her biggest hearted woman would give you the bite out of her mouth. There wasn't a family of travellers coming to our estate, but they got the best of eating and warmth and welcome in my mother's house, same as any other human being would. And there wouldn't have been people in trouble, even though she had nothing. She gave half of what, you know, there is a half of nothing, you know. And she'd have given the half of nothing and the whole of nothing away. And we had to come in from school sometimes, and the traveller woman would have called, and maybe a couple of children with her, and they'd have got our dinner. And we'd been coming in from school in Dungannon off the bus freezing, and my mother would have maybe tea and a bit of soda bread or something. And of course, being the good children we were, we complained loudly. And she would say, well, I'll tell you the next time, I'll keep the dinner and you can go with the traveller woman and sleep under the head. And then you just said, no, I think the tea would do. So we had, my father then, my father died when I was young. My father died when I was 9. And he was 10 years older than my mother. So he died at 46. He took a massive heart attack on his way back to work in England. He worked, like most men in England, as a joiner, carpenter. And but he was very musical and a great storyteller, and he learned stories from his blind granny. And there are those who still to this day say, as was said in those days, but you wouldn't say now, that the tinker wasn't far down in any of us. And I've never actually discovered whether that was just because we were odd, or whether there was a truth in that. But my father's family had a great history of storytelling, and my father was a great singer. So there was a lot of music in our house, and we grew up 5 girls and the wee boy at the end.
Very good. Could you give us a song? Just a wee bit of a song from that time. What do you
think? No, I can't sing now anymore. I wouldn't even know what would you sing.
You could shot.
When it was shot, it affected. I don't know whether it was the shooting or the, whether it was the punishment or the remedy. But something affected my throat, and it kind of was flat after that. Yeah, I don't know how to sing it. I tell you what, I might try.
Oh, lovely.
I'll just try a wee bit.
That'll be fantastic.
Because the song my father taught me was, "'Twas down by the glenside." Start again. "'Twas down by the glenside, I met an old woman. She was plucking young nettles and ne'er saw me coming. I listened a while to the song she was humming. Glory, oh, to the bold Fenian man. 'Tis 50 long years since I saw the moon gleaming on bright manly forms, their eyes with hope gleaming. I see them again, sure, through all my daydreaming. Glory, oh, to the bold Fenian man. I want some died by the wayside, some died with the stranger and wise men. They told us our cause was a failure, but they fought to free Ireland, and they never feared danger. Glory, oh, to the bold Fenian man. I went on my way, God be praised that I met her. Be my life long or short, I will never forget her. We may have brave men, but they'll never be better. Glory, oh, to the bold Fenian man. There you go. You see if the civil rights movement saved you from.
Bernadette, that's absolutely beautiful. And you know, I've heard many reasons why people might have a sore throat and not being able to sing too well. My goodness, your life has been full of so many tragic, dramatic, and wonderful moments too. I mean, you were shot, you were in prison, you were so many different things. But tell me, how did you get involved? Was your growing up did that shape you to become involved later in the civil rights movement?
Well, it did, but it did, and I didn't know it at the time. You know, the things that you realise when you look back on them was I grew up with that sense. You know, the people that influenced me most in my life were my father, who only lived for 9 years of it, and my mother, who lived for 19 years of it. But that home and family is very important for children, and it's what shapes them and gives them opportunities for the future. And so although we had no money, and certainly less when my father died, we were rich in every other thing. We grew up with my mother's sense of fairness and generosity, and she was a post-Vatican Catholic before the post-Vatican era, I remember do you remember when they did away with the saints? And my mother had, as lots of Irish people did, my mother had a wee altar from the Marian year, and it stayed on. And as new saints were discovered, and you finally made your way to St. Jude, hopeless cases. But on the way there, people like St. Philomena and others were discovered by my mother, and this wee altar grew, and then the Pope, in his infallibility, drew up a list of saints who had failed to make the grade. The evidence base and the criteria had not been met. And a number of these miscreants were on my mother's wee altar. So, of course, we were young teenagers at the time, and we were teasing her about it. We said, what are you going to do? What are you going to do with Philomena now? And my mother just turned around like that, and she said, just you turn and face that way, Philomena. till the Pope sees the error of his ways. So I kind of grew up with that. If my mother was going to take the Pope on, well, sure, I might as well.
You did a good job at it yourself.
And my father, my father was a union man, a trade union man. All his life he was an amalgamated woodworkers union from he was apprenticed as a woodworker, and a self-taught man, a self-read man, and a great, when my father died, he had no wealth to leave us, but he left his books, and my father had Thomas Paine, a copy of Thomas Paine with the writings of P.H. Pierce and of James Connolly, and then of course as teenagers, because it was your dead father, you read them, so he continued to influence us. So of course when the civil rights movement came along, I understood it from my own life, I understood it from my own lived experience, but unlike lots of other people, particularly people in Belfast or in Derry, I came from Cookstown and I grew up in a mixed community. I grew up, my neighbours, a bit like yourself, my friends and neighbours were Catholics, Protestants, dissenters. My sister and myself, shamelessly, we made fortunes, the two of us singing on Easter Sunday when the pub was supposed to be shut. That was my granny's pub. And on the 12th of July, we could sing all of them as well as we could sing the Bold Fenian Men or Bull of Hogue or anything else. And we passed the hat around and went home singing. And our friends and my father's friends, my mother's friends growing up, the people we looked on the adults who looked out for us were Catholic and Protestant and a lot of interesting people that went nowhere of a Sunday. and you looked and people looked at them, and people that you didn't have names for until many years later. So they were the kind of people that, when we look back on it, we realised we may have lived in an estate and looked the same as everybody else, but the mother and father were probably thought odd, eccentric or slightly dangerous themselves, and we didn't know. So when the civil rights movement came along,
the civil rights movement, you rose to prominence very early on in the civil rights movement, Bernadette. How did you become actively involved to a degree?
Do you know a very simple answer to that? I couldn't keep my mouth shut. That's the truth. I know, I didn't see myself. I used to say a lot, and when I did say something, it was only because I got so frustrated with the stupidity of what other people were saying. In my opinion, humble or not humble, as it was. So I would wait till people had said something, and then I'd have to say it. And then what I would find is people would be turning around to say, who said that? And I'm not entirely sure what it is I'm saying that makes people turn around and say, who said that? Because I'm only saying what I'm thinking. And because I had no wit. On the first march, we weren't allowed to march, and on the second march, we weren't long in catching on. There was penalties. You had to tell the police you were marching, and somebody had to sign for it, and the person who signed for it was going to pay the penalty if something went wrong. And I actually suppose if my mother and father had both been alive, I might have been as afraid as other people of getting scolded when you went home. But I had no break and I had no fear. And so when other people saying, well, I can't sign for it because I'm hoping to be a lawyer and I can't go to, because you're all students, or I can't sign for it because I'm hoping to be a teacher. And I thought, well, oh, for God's sake. Muggins' hand went up. And by such wise decision making can you make your way to the front. Because everybody said, right, okay, let Muggins go on ahead. And then, I don't know, then you were there, and I do accept that it's the way I tell them, I don't know why, that people then, that resonates with people. And I think that the serious point of that is that although things got pulled into Catholic and Protestant and this and that, the core message of what people wanted all the time boiled down to fair play and decency and equal respect and opportunity. And that wasn't there. And it wasn't there for many of the Protestant poor either. It definitely wasn't there. There was massive discrimination. And the more, I think I was very naive at the start, like Chicken Licken went to tell the king that the sky was falling down. I thought the people that ran the country mustn't know it wasn't being run properly. I thought that's the truth. And me at university, I actually thought that the English government mustn't know the mess that the Unionist was making in the country. Then I discovered the truth of the matter was it's a bit like Israel and the United States at the minute. The Unionists wouldn't get away with running the country like that if the government didn't know and didn't want it run like that. And when you discover that, a different light goes on in your head. It's just the same way now people would say, Israel isn't listening to the United States. The United States could make Israel listen if they wanted to, and they choose not. They choose not to because it is in their interest what's happening. Same thing.
That's something I'd love to talk about in a minute or two as well, Bernadette. But there's just a song came to my mind. They were walking, they were talking, they were laughing, they were singing, calling out for civil rights and freedom. And peace was on the banner that was floating in the breeze, all upon that Sunday, bloody Sunday. And as the years roll on, I still can't believe you're gone. They were walking, they were talking, they were laughing, they were singing, calling out for civil rights and freedom. But then it was a banner that left hanging in the air. Curse upon that Sunday, bloody Sunday. And as the years roll on, I still can't believe you're gone. That changed everything, Bernadette, didn't it?
It did. Bloody Sunday changed. Bloody Sunday changed everything.
The marches were all peaceful, and the mood and atmosphere in those marches.
The country wasn't peaceful, but the marches were peaceful.
Yeah.
And the marches were big and they were powerful. And in some of the ways, there were places where the loyalists would be allowed to beat the marches back. And the long march to Derry was one of those occasions, and that was January 1970. The Berntallet March. So the marches came under violent attack, but by and large, the civil rights movement marches themselves were peaceful, law-abiding marches, and indeed, to minimise those violent attacks, had retreated a bit to march in, as it were, in safe territory. The student Berntallet March kind of put paid to asserting your right to march the Queen's Highway. And And there was a build up to it, you know, when you look back on it again, reflected and had time to reflect. Ballymurphy and the behaviour of the army in Ballymurphy should have warned us. The behaviour of the army when John Hume had a march on the McGilligan Strand should have warned us. And when we tried to march from Dungannon to Coal Island, just because we were tired marching from Coal Island to Dungannon, that's the truth. Somebody had a bright idea, would turn it round. And we didn't realise the logic of that, or the logistics of that meant that we all gathered as a body in Dungannon and we weren't safe there. Whereas when we gathered as a body in Coal Island, we were safe and we never got to Dungannon. And the viciousness with which the military, not the police, the military beat us off that road, you know, came down with helicopters, and we should have seen Bloody Sunday coming. But you don't see it coming because something in your head says the army wouldn't shoot you for nothing. You just, up until January 1972, nobody would have actually believed that the British Army would shoot you for nothing. And then after Bloody Sunday, there's almost a transgenerational memory that makes you ask yourself, how were you ever stupid enough to think the British Army wouldn't shoot you? What else was the British Army in Ireland for? And it was that. That's what changed it, and changed if the, and again, you know, looking to now where we are in the world, if the law doesn't apply to the government, if the law doesn't apply to the army, if the government's allowed to break the law and break the rules and kill people, then there is no law, and the rest of us don't have to abide by it either. So there was a turn to militarism.
There was a sense of that in, I remember when I met you that time on the Bit and Bridle in Uri, it was the week after Bloody Sunday, and during that week, you were an MP at the time. You were the youngest MP ever elected at that time. And you were in Westminster the day after Bloody Sunday, but they didn't allow you to talk.
I wouldn't. That's my odd claim to fame. Probably the only time I ever hit anybody in my life was that I hit Reginald Maudlin a dig on the way out of Westminster in the back. At the background to that was that I was there, and the rule, you know, it wasn't the law, it was the rule, the tradition in the House of Commons that after the, you know, some kind of event like that, after the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition would have spoken to that, and whatever ministers, which would have been Reginald Maudlin, would speak to that, that the priority of speaking was to cover a multitude of sins, the honourable members. But anybody who was actually a witness to what was being discussed had priority of speaking, and I wasn't allowed to speak at all. And I knew he was lying. So there were two things made Bloody Sunday as important as it was, and we see that again on the world stage. One, that they did it. One, that the army knowingly, and Michael Jackson, who's just recently dead, and I will not say God rest his soul, try not to say may it never rest, but Michael Jackson planned that, General Michael Jackson, knowingly set up to shoot unarmed young men to look as if there had been, you know, a surge of violence that was going to have to be cracked down on, and then lied about it and was allowed to lie about it, and the government lied to protect him and his lie, and the press and the media lied to protect the government. And it was the same as the Hillsborough disaster. It's the same as everything else. It's the same as we see the lies being told now. We see suffering with our own eyes in Gaza and Lebanon and everywhere. and yet we see the television, the BBC, RT's not quite as bad, but shame, trying to tell us that we're imagining that, and we don't see it. You know, that's what's happening isn't happening. And it took 30 years and a lot of money to pull the truth painfully out of them. And we're still trying to pull the truth then. Once you know that they would do that, then there's nothing they wouldn't do. Nothing you wouldn't do. You know, if the people who are supposed to protect you shoot you because they don't like your politics and then lie about it and are allowed to, then what would they not do? So there was no trust after that. There was no.
You were that
no
one
trust
constant, consistent voice during all the time saying you can't do that. And you were put in jail then for a while. Tell us about that.
Oh, well, I was in jail. I was in jail before that, 1969, because of the Battle of the Bogside, which again was, and it wasn't anything to do really with the loyalists. The 1969 in the Bogside, the bit that concerned was that it was Royal Black Preceptory Parade the last Saturday, and traditionally, you know, from the 12th of July, beginning of July to the end of August, Catholics were hemmed in their own places because it was marching season. And marching season was to say that they were better than us. You know, we are the people, and you don't count. And you see that, you know, when you went, I saw that when I went to other places. It wasn't just us. You went to America, white people are the people, and black people, brown people, Puerto Ricans, Chicanos, they didn't count, second class people. And you see it in Palestine. Palestinians don't count, they're second class people. And so we were in the Bogside, and people had put up barricades in case, because of the tensions, the police would come into the area. They weren't afraid of the loyalists, and it wasn't the loyalists that came in. They were afraid of the police because in April, when I'd been elected, and it always stuck in my mind that because I was associated with Derry, even though I wasn't from there, that Derry paid dearly for my being elected. I was elected in April, and within 10 days of my being elected, the police had killed Sam Devaney in his own house because they had stormed in to the Bogside area and just broke down people's doors and attacked them in their houses. And there was an inquiry over that. So I went to jail because again, Muggins, I only happened, Lord Scarman in the inquiry did say, I always remembered it, Miss Devlin, not saying that you caused the trouble, but you have a remarkable propensity for being where it occurs. So I went to jail, and again, ironically.
What is it like in there?
It was great. I was the only person, like you would think, you'd think that I was the only person rioting in Derry. I was the only person charged and the only person that went to jail. So when I went to jail, there was only 7 women. I made it 8. And I was only there for 6 months. And I was glad of the rest. There are not many people who go to jail. And when the door closes behind them, you go, nobody can get through that door. And I thought I would take stock in jail, and I always say to people, you see, up to the point where I went to jail, I was like a cork carried on the river. You know, I was not actually, I couldn't say that I was consciously making the decisions that were affecting my life. I wasn't in control of those things. But I have no excuse once I got out of jail, because I had time in there to think. and I could have gathered myself and quit. But the more I thought, the worse it got. And I came out with the only difference between when I went in and when I came out, and it was, I think, Mary Holland who described it that way. I came out my own woman. And so I was responsible myself. But jail was great inside. There was only seven women in it, and it was a sign of the time. There were two women in there. One was an older woman, and one was a younger woman, and both of them were in relation for procuring abortions. So there were two people in prison in 1969 when we had no safe pregnancy termination, no safe abortions. And as people say, you can't ban abortion, you can only ban safe abortions because you push them back into the back streets. And there's a wee woman in there who stole money out of the post office. Not a pile of it. She was working in the post office, and when people come in with their post office books because somebody had died, and people were honest and brought it back and didn't cash the last payment, she cashed it. She cashed it for the dead and kept it. And then her conscience got the better of her, and she was caught putting the money back. And they only noticed the crime when she was putting the money back, and they still put the woman in jail. You know, and I thought that was unfair. And then there were a couple of traveller women. There was old Mary who was in, because she came in shortly before I went out. And Mary came into jail because she broke a big shop window. And I said, Mary, why did you break the shop window? Well, she said, I needed somewhere to be for the winter. So jail, I have to say, was about the best 6 months rest and good company that I had for a long time.
Constant thing coming through all the time, Bernadette. You know, you weren't against orange or green or nationalism in the sense you were about equality and justice. And when Muhammad Ali came to Ireland, he was interviewed in RTE, and he was asked who would he like to meet in Ireland, and the first name he mentioned, the only name he mentioned, was, I want to meet Bernadette Devlin.
That's right.
Why was that? And you met?
I did, yes. And that was when he came to fight here. Was in the early 70s. So by that time, you know, whenever I was the youngest, whatever, since whenever, and the best thing since sliced bread. It was all looking good. By the time I got to 73, I was public enemy #1. So to say on RTE that he'd like to meet me didn't, you know, it wasn't met with, oh God, that would be great. Can we come and get a photo of that? No, it was, don't anybody ask him again. But Ali's people got in touch and said, look, Muhammad Ali really would like to have an opportunity to talk to you. And I went down, and Michael, my husband, we weren't married at the time, he was into boxing. So him and his friend from the boxing club and myself and the other guy's wife, the four of us went down and met Muhammad Ali and his family and had dinner with them and spent the whole evening with them, talking politics and talking boxing. Men talking boxing and me talking politics. And I asked him, I said, well, why did you say you wanted to meet me? He said, I want to know, every black person in America, he said, knows me, but I want to know, why does every black person in America know you? So, you know, and I said so, I was telling him about when I went then, the first time to America, and got the freedom of New York and gave because I didn't, you know, it's the way my head just worked and still works. What do I want the freedom of New York for? I didn't live there. What I needed was freedom at home. FBI shoot to kill policy of the Panthers was going on in America and California and everywhere else. So the people who needed freedom in New York were the Black Panthers. So I thought, well, I don't know what magic power this key might have, but they'd be as well having it as me. Now, that went down like a lead, like a lead balloon. And then I could see in America, I went there in '69 and I got a lot of education in it because I'd never been anywhere. You see, you have to remember that. I'd come out of Tyrone. I'd rarely been in Belfast till I went to Queen's. I'd been in England once before I was elected to Parliament, and that's as far as I ever got. So when I went to America and met Irish Americans who were very much in favour of the civil rights movement, and many of them much more in favour of reunifying Ireland and doing it by revolution and arms if necessary. So that's where Irish America was. But they couldn't see, you know, whenever I sent them, look, we took our inspiration from the Black Civil Rights Movement, and they'd say, well, but just don't understand that, it's different over here. It's different over here. And you'd say, well, why is it different? Black people don't want to work. They're lazy. Black people, you couldn't trust them. You know, there's a badness in their eye. And, you know, we heard that from Orangemen. We heard that from bigots at home. And you'd say to them, hang on a minute, you're beginning to sound like an Orangeman. People weren't too, you know, and they couldn't see it. They couldn't see it. Now, I'm not saying all Irish Americans, that wasn't universal. There was plenty of people, Irish Americans, who could see it. But, you know, our people had left Ireland poor, had left Ireland driven out by famine, had left Ireland driven out by politics. But these were now second, third generation who'd made it up the ladder. And they had this notion of Ireland that still remained, but it had no connection with seeing where their position was in America. And the more places I went, people would say to me, do not talk about socialism. Don't talk about social justice. Social justice to them was communism. Equality was a bad word because of the way they felt about the civil rights movement in America. And don't talk about blacks. And I'd say, well, I don't have anything then to talk about.
You were in a position then just to say the right words and you'd have been canonized for the rest of your life. But you weren't going to go down that road and you suffered because of it.
Well,
in one sense, I mean...
I wouldn't say... well, there are those people who said I went to America and I left a trail of destruction behind me that remained until Jerry Adams went to America and sorted it out. And I keep saying, hang on a minute, which of us here has nothing in our pockets but our hands? No, how do you put it together like that? But there was a truth in it. I made Irish America uncomfortable with the contradiction of where it stood in Ireland and where it stood when it affected their own pockets, to be fair and equal. And then after the hunger strikes, which was when Sinn Féin, I think, realised that the broad Republican movement realised that militarism alone was not going to win. There was going to have to be, you know, as I talked about the ballot box and the bullet, but the need to build alliances politically, and that Sinn Féin began then to move, I think, to realise that there had to be some peace, some more peaceful way to make progress. And they could have, like me, made their American alliances with other people who suffered injustices. But that was a long road, not necessarily the wrong road. And the straightest road to get to where you needed to go was to deal with what Falafel used to call the people with clout. And Irish America had climbed that ladder. Irish America was in the parties of power, Democrats, Republicans. Irish America had made it to the presidency already. So I think it was a logistical decision to build your alliances in Irish America, and then that, to an extent, limited. You either had to have two policies, one for there and one for home, or it began to limit what had been the kind of republicanism of Thomas Paine to the nationalism to Irish nationalism, which took in Hibernianism rather than the more egalitarian, radical philosophy of republicanism, whose natural home was to the left. The natural home of nationalism is to the right. And and Sinn Féin still working those problems out. They're still caught.
The hunger strike for a moment, just two thoughts, Bernadette. The whole the hunger strike idea is so deep in the psyche of the Irish tradition from the Brehon laws. If you weren't getting justice, you would starve yourself outside the person's house who was doing the injustice to you, and if they didn't feed you, they would be ostracized by the community. And in a sense, with the hunger strike, which that hunger strike idea, Gandhi took it from Ireland as well, but that hunger strike idea, Thatcher tried to win, but in fact, in the long term, she didn't win because the hunger strike won in a strange way. But it also was responsible in a way for getting you shot.
That's right. I was involved in. Well, the first part of that story was actually the European elections, which came up, and there were the things in the prison had got worse, and you kind of felt the prisoners don't have anywhere else to go. They were already because of the change that Merlin Rees had brought in. He just picked a date, and because prisoners were imprisoned through emergency laws, special courts, and not through a democratic and legal justice system. The British government had initially created special status. They called, because there were emergency special laws, there was special status for the prisoners. And it was the British government that separated the Republican prisoners out from the general prison population. And then the Labour government under Merlin Rees, sometime about 74, I think it was, or 75, set a date and said anybody convicted by the same process after that date would no longer have special status. But nothing else changed. You still had the diplomatic courts, you still had the guilty until proven innocent, you still had that silence implied guilt, all of those things. And that's when the first Republican then refused, because the core of, or what the government called it, ordinary decent criminal, ODC. The first thing of ODC status was it wore a prison uniform, whereas in the special, which was just again logistics, so the prison guards could tell the difference. The ordinary decent criminals who were convicted, and that was the government's craze. They had prison uniforms and all the people wore their own clothes. And then the first Republican in after that refused to put on the prison uniform and got no clothes. They were left, that's how they became the blanket men. And that went on until something was going to give. And then the European elections came up, and there was Relatives for Justice, didn't exist at the time, but there was the relatives committees of mostly women, mothers, wives, sisters of prisoners who had formed relatives action committees. And the relatives action committees took a decision that we should stand a candidate in a European election because the whole North was one constituency. And it would give us a chance to see if we could build support for the prisoners. And the Republican movement objected to that. They were their prisoners and they didn't like elections. And because we were a bundle of women, we said, it's all right, we're not asking you to stand. And they thought that was very impertinent about that. And we said, look, it's all right, we can do it because we're not Sinn Féin and we're not the Ra. So, and nobody's asking you to stand. So there was a bit of a standoff, and of course, who can't keep our mouth shut, stood in the European elections. But the importance of that was that 35,000 people in Northern Ireland, because that was our first PR election, 35,000 people put a number one vote in the North for the men in the H blocks. In spite of the fact that Sinn Féin, the Army, the SDLP and every other party in the North were opposed to that happening. So this bundle of women had made it happen. And then the Republican movement came back to us and said, look, let's try it your way. Let's try and build a mass movement of peaceful protest to support the prisoners. So we formed the National H Block Committee. And during the first hunger strike, which ended just before Christmas, Miriam Daly of the National H Block Committee, John Turnley of the National H Block Committee, Noah Little, who replaced, a bit like the Israelis shooting everybody, you know, who steps up to the plate. Miriam was shot and Noah Little took her place on the committee, and he was shot, they were killed. Ronnie Bunting was shot because Noah Little was in his house. There's one other member of the H Block Committee was shot, so there was 4 assassinations before Christmas, and then the hunger strike ended, and the concessions that were supposed to be granted began to fall through. And we understood that the word in the prisons were that they would get to the end of the month. The government would get to the end of the month, and if the concessions weren't being delivered, there was talk of the hunger strike starting again. So I was actually out at a meeting of the local Tyrone H Block Committee and came home that night, and then I was shocked, and our house was attacked that night in the early hours of the morning. But it wasn't, I wasn't shocked for anything I had done, in my mind. I was shocked for what I might be doing, which was if that second hunger strike had started, then they had to get rid of the key people who might be able to organise again. And then the people who come in to my house and shot us were arrested leaving the house. And the British military and British government's role in attacking my house and having me shot and my husband shot in front of our children, we'll never hear the truth of that. But that to my mind again was, the General Sir Hugh Pike of the paratroopers knew I was going to be shot. And he stationed 4 of his soldiers outside of my house to arrest the people he believed would kill me and put an end, after I was dead, and put an end to that. Now, the devil looks after his own. And I hadn't the decency to die.
They actually left you for dead.
Yes. The Paras left us for dead. And what happened?
It's quite a few shots, like, wasn't it?
I was shot 7 times from here to here, and once in this leg. And out of decency, I'll just say, if I showed it to you, you can see one of the marks is right there.
Yeah.
And grazed the outer wall of my heart. But I'm still here. And my husband actually, he was shot 6 times and was lucky to survive that as well. Now again, Pat Finucane and others who were killed. But we're not a legacy case because we're not dead. But the same collusion, the same breaking of the law by the law makers applied to us. And the reason it didn't work, the questions have to be answered. I went home that night and I saw the Paras. I'm coming in, driving. I live in the country, driving in. You see the wee eyes looking at you, they're like cats. Eyes peeping at you out of the darkness. And they wouldn't normally be lying outside my house in the middle of nowhere. And I said to them, these were nearly my famous last words: "Good evening, gentlemen. Have you no homes of your own to go to?" Lying outside decent people's houses. And then my husband tried to get me up early in the morning because he heard the car come. He looked out the window. He saw the guys coming with the hammer who put the door in, and he was trying to tell me to get up, that the loyalists were at the door, but I thought he was telling me that the Paras were outside, and I don't like being wakened up. And I was saying to them, I know, I told you that when I was coming in. The Paras are lying outside our door. And the first time that I really woke up was when they put the door in with a hammer and fired shots in through the door. But the Paras came in after a while. I shouted in the doors, anybody alive in there? And nobody answered. Because we weren't sure whether if you said, where each had to shout, yeah, me. And somebody say, that's all right, we'll put paid to that very shortly. So none of us answered. But then they came in, and it's terrible sometimes what happens in how osmosis affects children. One soldier took a bar of chocolate out, took the 3 children into one room and tried to give the children chocolate. And our Roisin was only 9. Deirdre was 5 and Fintan wasn't yet 2. And Roisin wouldn't let them take the chocolate. It was only 9. She wouldn't, and Deirdre was the youngest. Deirdre kept going to. Deirdre said that Deirdre's most traumatic memory of our shooting is that her sister wouldn't let her. The chocolate, and Roisin's most traumatic memory is that she had a sister who was going to take the chocolate. But the Paras came in and they did nothing. And they were shocked. What shocked them was we were still alive. They didn't know what to do. And it was such a cold night, and the radio wasn't working. And one of them went to a neighbour's house to make a phone call, and they phoned Army headquarters. And while they were away, because the other guys were afraid. They were in what the army calls Indian territory. And they put a flare up. And it was the Argyll and Southern Highlanders who then came, once they had cleared who was in the area. And it was the Argyll and Southern Highlanders who told us that they hadn't known the pirates were in the area. So when a flare went up, they had to take care that they weren't being lured into an ambush. And it was the Argyll and Southern Highlanders who came about 40 minutes after the paras had put the flare up, who gave us first aid and sent for the helicopter.
Were you unconscious?
No, neither Michael nor Michael was bleeding very badly and losing consciousness, but Her Ladyship was lying on the floor, and I pulled the blanket of the bed down to keep myself. And I'd asthma when I was a child, and I was practicing breathing. I remember checking, the way your head works. I thought, 13, I asked myself, this sounds crazy, I asked myself 13 13s, and I knew the answer was 169. On this analysis, I decided I hadn't been shot in the head. 13 13 is 106 arm a bit, but I knew this arm, something seriously wrong with this arm and with this leg. And I knew myself there was something wrong with my left lung, but I thought I could still breathe, and I couldn't feel a lot of blood. So I'm kind of, that's what I'm at. Michael, who had less sense than me, crawled from where he was, and he was losing blood. He didn't have the wit to stay where he was. And they took me to the hospital first, and Michael and I are the only two non-combatants from 1968 till 1998 who were flown past 3 civilian hospitals to the military hospital. We were the only civilians ever injured to have been taken to the military hospital. And we still don't have answers. And the reason I then was discharged to the Royal was in the haste to fix here, and the leg and the arm. And we got the best of medical attention in the military hospital. I have to say that in the military hospital, didn't matter who we were, very best of medical attention. Michael might have lost his arm had he not been in the military hospital, because I had such experience with those kinds of injuries. But I knew when I was lying on the floor that I was losing air out of my lung, because I had suffered from asthma as a child. But they missed that bit, and then realised that I was fading, after they'd done all they thought they could. And I was moved out of the military hospital to the Royal Victoria so that I wouldn't die in the military hospital. And then it was in the Royal where their expertise was slightly different, because the military were dealing mostly with the physical injuries. That the surgeon said there's something missing here, and they detected the nip in the back of my lungs. So they patched that up, and I was on. And that, going back to the start, is where my voice went, because I was on the life support machine for, I think, the best part of 10, 11 days. And whether it was just all the tubes or the amount of anaesthetic.
Just thinking again, Bernadette.
That was a nice story. Now you just need a pint. I need a pint. Sorry about that.
I've never heard a more valid excuse for not being able to sing to but just thinking, when there's collusion, where are we to turn? Where is right and wrong? Collusion, when makers of the law are breakers of the law, until there is no law at all. And in a way, everything fell apart.
Yeah.
With that. This is a very singular, special night. It might never happen again, and I think it's wonderful that Bernadette is here. Already people are asking us to do things again. We may not do them, we don't know. But it's very special here tonight. And Bernadette, there's so many more things I don't want to. It's getting late, and you've worked very hard and told us so many things that I never knew about. I mean, your daughter, Roisin, was put in jail as well. She had her baby in jail, and I met her the last time we met. In fact, the last time we met wasn't all that long ago. You were making a presentation to a woman called Linda Irvine. You may have heard of her, a wonderful woman, married Brian Irvine, brother of David Irvine, one of the leaders of the Loyalists. And I remember one time, Bernadette, some years ago, when David Irvine was alive, I had arranged, or tried to arrange, yourself and David to meet in Rostrevor, and we were going to have a chat. And it said, my fault entirely, I didn't confirm it with you, and you didn't come. You didn't know to come. But David Irvine is sitting there, and there's an empty chair. And I said to David, David, I have a question for Bernadette. She's not here. Could you answer the questions the way you think Bernadette could answer? And he did.
And he did. He was
he was
man.
He was a special man. But where are we now with unionism, nationalism, socialism, possibilities forward? We have a peace process which is brilliant to have that, where we can look at things maybe more clearly.
Well, I think it's interesting to see where we are now. You know, we've had the peace process, and and I would argue we do not have peace. You know, we're still working towards that. We don't have peace. We have the absence of war. There's a big gap between the absence of war and peace. We have a degree of reconciliation, whatever that is. But regardless of what it is, we don't even totally have reconciliation. And we won't have, for a number of things. First of all, the civil rights movement was about undoing an historic injustice that left people unfairly treated. And there is no requirement on people to be reconciled to injustice. In fact, nobody should ever become reconciled with injustice. But in the denouement of all of that, there were things done on everybody's part and on every part of the equation that should never have happened. And people drift into those cruelties and inhumanities one step at a time. Very, very few people go from here to there in one step. It's not in human nature to do that. But as Yeats said, too long a sacrifice makes a stone of the heart. So you get into a situation where, because of what others do, you think it's all right for you to do that too, when in actual fact you become like them. And again, the behaviour of the State of Israel, which now murders nothing but 1930s Germany, is the last denouement of that you become that which you opposed if you adopt that same logic and methodology. But where we are is a very, if you look in a positive way, not because I want it, or maybe some people here want it, but because the realities of social, economic, politics, demographics, and the context of the wider world is that partition in Ireland is coming to an end. There's no doubt about that. People can be in denial about it, but it's coming. Now, to my mind, that puts a significant onus of responsibility on us that wasn't on us before, because it is, if you like, that we are now in the driving seat. So the responsibility for us is to ensure that, and the reason I raise it is because it's not where the pull is. My concern is that it's not where the pull is, because I think the conflict going on within the Republican movement is one to try and build a fairer Ireland all round, but the pull is also to create the united Ireland, the old, which exists within the nostalgia of their Irish American support. And there's a tension there between building a nationalist Ireland and building a united Ireland which has room and equality for all, including protecting the rights, not the prejudices, but the rights of what will then be a minority in the United Ireland, those people whose cultural and historic identity is British. Now, and we can call them Irish till the cows come home. But people are entitled under the United Nations to self-define their own national identity. And we have people in the north, and let me tell you, in the south, waiting to be allowed to say it out loud. We might call people West Brits in the Free State as an insult, but the day will come when people will feel safe enough to say out loud and without shame, actually, you know what, I'm one of them. Because they're entitled to be. They're not entitled to think they're better than the rest of us, which is part of the Dublin 4 problem, not just that the West Brits, they think that that's better than the rest of us. It's not. So that's I think that's a big responsibility on us. And I think that we need to be having, and people are having, we need to be having very serious conversations now about how people would have us dragged into NATO in the morning. There's a body of people would have a united Ireland back in the British Commonwealth in the morning. And those people are already working on their plans, but the rest of us need, particularly in the north, to look at and begin very open conversations about how are we going to protect the rights of the British minority in Ireland, for want, if you want to say as an ethnic minority, for want of another word, in that way.
Bernadette, I think your voice, it hasn't been missing because you've been working with migrants in County Tyrone for years and doing wonderful things. But I think your wisdom and your voice is badly needed in the Ireland of today, and I'm delighted. Actually, there's a song. We're going to finish off with a song, and it's a song that we were going to sing a song, and we will sing a song called "O Roisin de Vachawali," which then we thought about maybe Pierce wrote the version that many people know. If Pierce is alive today, what would he write? And Bernadette, myself,
we wrote it for him.
Put your hand up again.
So this is the first time you'll hear it, maybe the last time you'll ever hear it. You never know.
But we took a notion. We were going to sing Pierce's "O Roisin de Vachawali," and then we thought, you know what? If Pierce was around the day, he'd wrote that slightly. And it was his fault. But we ended up penning only a day or two ago, and here it goes.
Well, start. Granuaile, of course, is very much part of it. Granuaile is also an allegorical name for Ireland as well as being a real physical person. And down through the years, when the Irish poets were not allowed to use the word Ireland in their songs, they used the name of a woman very often, Rushing Dew, and so on. Then you couldn't be arrested for a love song. And that's why so many songs like this are very important. Granuaile upon the ocean, rising in a new horizon, making waves of hope and healing, Anisharhat and Tari. Oro Shivahawalya, Oro Shivahawalya, Oro Shivahawalya, Anisharhat and Tari.
Bringing to our shores for shelter those who risk the seas for freedom, fleeing famine, war and sorrow, searching for safe haven. Oro Shivahawalya, Oro Shivahawalya, Oro Shivahawalya, Anisharhat and Tari. This is no invading army, children, women, men as we are. We'd disgrace our warrior Grania if we, pardon me, refuse them shelter.
Oro Shivahawalya, Oro Shivahawalya, Oro Shivahawalya, Anisharhat and Tari. Can we be Irish, North or Southern, knowing of our people's hungering? Recognize the eyes of suffering now landing on our island. Oro Shivahawalya, Oro Shivahawalya, Oro Shivahawalya, Anisharhat and Tari.
The day may come for your returning to the homeland you were born in. Freedom, justice, peace may reign there, as it will in Ireland. Oro Shivahawalya,
Oro Shivahawalya, Oro Shivahawalya. Welcome home to Ireland. Oro Shivahawalya, Oro Shivahawalya, Oro Shivahawalya. Welcome home to Ireland. And the Devlin.
Maybe you see us out then, which is so, you see the good thing there.
Tommy, that's brilliant. Sorry. Well, just a little something. Tomorrow we have a Cailín here. If you haven't got any money, you can still come. And there's food as well, so just turn up if you can. On Sunday afternoon, we have a family day for young people to be indoctrinated in Irish culture. And on Sunday night, we've given up altogether and we're going downstairs, and Mike Ryan is running a disco for us. So it'd be a lot of country Irish, you know. Yeah, no. Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, comrades, friends and fellow workers, Reverend Fathers, ladies and gentlemen, all the rest of it. You've been at a historic night tonight in the Ironside.
Yeah.
A really historic night. And you've heard Tommy, who's campaigned across the communities for peace most of his life. But somebody said, without justice, you have no peace. And Bernadette is, above all, a fighter for justice and therefore a fighter for peace. It's been a fantastic privilege for us to have you here, Bernadette, and to Tommy Sands for bringing Bernadette. And if you want to see the peace heroines upstairs, go to see them. We've got a peace heroine here on the stage. Please give us a big standing ovation. Thank you very much. Very much.
We're going to finish off now with a song from Tommy.
I couldn't hear your music and the pub your painting sound. I wouldn't read your writing and it banned you from the town. But they couldn't stop you dreaming and a victory you've won. For you saw the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. You saw the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons. Your weary smile, it proudly hides the chain marks on your hands, where you bravely strive to realize the rights of everyone. And though your body's bent and low, a victory you've won. Where you sow the seeds of justice in your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. You sow the seeds of justice in your daughters and your sons. I don't know your religion, but one day I heard you pray for a world where everyone can work and children they can play. And though you never got your share of the fruits that you have won, you sowed the seeds of equality in your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. You sowed the seeds of equality in your daughters and your sons. They taunted you in Belfast and they tortured you in Spain. And in that Warsaw ghetto where they tied you up in chains. In Vietnam and Chile when they came with tanks and guns. It's there you sowed the seeds of peace in your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. It's there you sowed the seeds of peace in your daughters and your sons. And now your music's playing and the writing's on the wall. And all the dreams you painted can be seen by one and all. And now you've got them thinking and the future's just begun. Where you sowed the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons. In your daughters, you sowed the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons. We'll sing it again. In your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. You sowed the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons.
Lawrence in there. This young woman here has a beautiful voice. Do you sing? Yeah.
Want to sing a song?
No, maybe not. But you do sing. Do you sing just for yourself? I was listening to you, and I could hear you there too.
Thank you very much. But by the way, if anyone did a recording of this, we'd love you maybe share it with us. Yeah. Because it's a special night for us all, and thank you very much indeed, and particularly to Bernadette Devlin McAliskey.
And most of all to yourselves, you're very close.